Hey guys, tonight we begin with something quieter, dustier, and far less stable than you'd like your new life in post-Roman Europe. The empire has fallen, the baths are closed, and your plumbing is now just wishful thinking. You don't know the exact year because calendars are mostly for monks, but you do know this: whatever came after Rome feels suspiciously like before it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing who's drifting off from which corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up on a straw pallet inside what used to be the storeroom of a Roman villa. Or maybe it was a temple. Now it's just your home because nobody kept records after the local governor skipped town 3 decades ago. The once smooth mosaic floor has been lifted stone by stone for other uses, maybe to reinforce a barn or line a fire pit. What's left crunches under your feet like confetti after a really bad party. There's no glass in the windows, just roughly tacked animal skins that smell like wet goat and lose the war against the wind most nights. The walls still bear traces of faded frescoes, noble figures with laurel crowns and tunics, but their faces are peeling away quite literally. Bits of their glory flake off when you sneeze. Your first real sensory experience of the day isn't birdsong or sunlight. It's the sound of a rat chewing on something that might have once been your only shoe. The fire in your hearth went out hours ago. You could relight it if you had firewood or flint or dry kindling. But let's be honest, you don't. Most mornings you beg a coal from the neighbor who may or may not still like you, depending on yesterday's argument about pig droppings in the shared path. Friendship here is transactional and flammable like dry thatch in summer. The air outside is cold, damp, and full of bird sounds. Not charming ones, just loud ones. You poke your head out and breathe in what passes for fresh morning air, but smells more like smoke and compost. In the distance, you can hear a bell. That means the monastery is calling for morning prayer. That bell has more order in its clang than anything else in your life. It's the closest thing to timekeeping you'll get. As you stumble outside, the road once paved by Roman engineers is now a suggestion. Stones are missing, mud pools in the ruts. Somewhere underfoot lie layers of lost infrastructure, aqueducts, drains, foundations. But above ground, it's just boot-sucking muck. You wonder if anyone's tried to fix it, but then remember that skilled labor is scarce and nobody trusts engineers anymore. They were Roman, and Romans are gone. Your village or settlement or whatever term you like for a few dozen wooden homes and repurposed ruins sits atop the bones of a Roman outpost. And like everything post-Roman, it's a combination of resourceful and depressing. Need a beam. Take it from that fallen column. Need a new roof that amphora little do in a pinch. Need dignity. Sorry that retired with the last legion. Historians still argue whether daily life truly collapsed after Rome's fall, or if it just shifted focus into new forms of localized resilience. From your perspective, standing ankle-deep in freezing mud while gnawing on yesterday's onion crust, the word resilient feels a bit optimistic. You pass the villa ruin that used to house the magistrate. It now holds sheep. The marble bath inside has been filled with straw. The columns tilt like they're tired of standing. You don't remember a time when this wasn't the case. And yet people live here. Life continues. Someone nearby is hauling a wooden bucket toward the well, which often spits up more silt than water. The bucket leaks slightly. They don't seem to mind. Neither do you. Expectations have adjusted. The smell of wood smoke drifts by. It's pleasant at first. Then it sharpens someone's burning dung again. That's heat these days. You breathe shallowly, eyes watering, and continue your morning routine, which mostly involves not freezing. Your clothes are one step above a sack, woven by hand, dyed by accident. They itch. They don't match. They've never known soap. You tie them tight with a strip of leather and mutter a brief curse at the cold wind that slides right through every seam. Even in this moment, you feel the weight of what's been lost. Roads that went somewhere. Baths that warmed you. Water that arrived via pipe, not hope. People once crossed continents from here. You're lucky if your cousin visits from 3 fields over without getting lost. But still the bones of the empire remain, sometimes quite literally. You stub your toe on a buried tile. A glimmer of painted stone peeks through the muck. It might have been part of a triumphal arch once. Now it's an inconvenience. Someone calls your name. Sort of. It's more of a grunt with intent. You wave back. That's communication. That's community. And somewhere behind you, a rat finishes your shoe. You're hungry, but that's nothing new. In fact, it's such a normal state that you've developed a sort of second brain just for managing it, one that makes creative suggestions like, maybe chew on that stale barley lump again, or why not gnaw the hard end of that onion breakfast in the post-Roman world, is not about satisfaction. It's about not fainting before noon. You shuffle toward the hearth, where a stone crock sits half submerged in yesterday's ashes. Inside is something resembling pottage, only without the comforting part. You poke it. It doesn't respond. A few dried lentils cling to the bottom like survivors of a sunken ship. The smell is somewhere between fermented roots and disappointment. Bread is an option if you're lucky, or if you enjoy the taste of tree bark and sand. Most bread now is made from barley or rye bulked up with ground acorns, moss, or the fine powder scraped from the millstone's edge. You chew it anyway. It fights back like a jaw exercise designed by a sadistic monk. Historians still argue whether famine was truly widespread across post-Roman Europe or simply chronic malnutrition hidden beneath low expectations. But from your personal perspective, the line between thin and starving has blurred into one long, rumbling afternoon. Once in a while, someone finds an old Roman cellar packed with amphorae or forgotten stores. You've never been that lucky. The last time someone claimed to find Roman grain, it turned out to be rat droppings. Nobody talks to Flavio anymore. Meat is theoretical. You hear about it, smell it sometimes when the Lord's men pass through. But for you, the closest thing to meat is whatever creature died near your carrot patch and wasn't too far gone to smoke. You tell yourself the smell is just the herbs. There's a saying among the elders, a man who eats roots grows slow but steady. But you know that's mostly to make you feel better about eating nothing but roots. The soil, of course, isn't always cooperative. You remember the blight from 2 winters ago, the one that left your turnips the size of pebbles and shaped like insults. Nobody really recovered from that. You still have a rock in your hut that looks suspiciously like one of those turnips. Sometimes you stare at it and wonder if it still has nutritional value. You wander into the field behind your home. It's not really a farm. It's more like a hopeful clearing. Weeds outnumber crops. Birds eye you suspiciously. Somewhere nearby, a squirrel gnaws confidently on what might have once been a prized bean pod. You try not to take it personally. There's no fertilizer, at least not the kind you'd want to handle. Manure is precious. So is time. And the tools bent rusted or inherited from someone who died during that thing we don't call a plague. But people adapt. You kneel and dig for edible tubers with a flat stone scraping soil with one hand and swatting flies with the other. You find something soft. You sniff it. It might be edible, or it might be a buried rag. Either way, it's going in the pot tonight. You once tried planting wheat. The seed was old. The crows were not. They watched you from the fence like judgmental tax collectors, then ate everything before it even sprouted. You briefly considered eating the crows. The local priest says hunger purifies the soul. You think hunger mostly makes you irritable. But you nod along when he talks because he also controls access to the monastery's surplus grain, which might exist or might be a rumor started by the scribe who's never hungry. You trade when you can, a chipped comb for a withered onion, a skein of rough wool for a scoop of last season's oats. Currency doesn't mean much out here. The old Roman coins you sometimes find while digging beautiful silver things with proud noses and laurel crowns are more useful as sewing weights than as tender. No one remembers the emperors, but everyone remembers who owes whom a chicken. Today, you chew a slice of bark-thick bread, tear a chunk from a frost-dried apple, and sip something that tastes faintly like boiled dirt water, which it is. You tell yourself the bitterness builds character. A neighbor wanders past with a small basket of sorrel and stinging nettle. They nod solemnly. You nod back. It's the post-Roman version of comparing grocery carts. Once you heard about a city far south where the markets are full of dates and roasted lamb, where people eat fish wrapped in fig leaves and drink honeyed wine. You don't know if it's real or just a dream your stomach had one night while you were sleeping beside the fire. But it's enough to keep you foraging. For now. You return to your hut clutching 3 lumpy roots, 1 suspicious tuber, and a handful of dandelion leaves. It's not a feast. It's barely a meal. But it'll keep your stomach company for another evening, and if you're lucky, the rats might share. By now, the hunger's dulled into a background hum, annoying but familiar. Unfortunately, that's not the only bodily discomfort you're dealing with. Your skin itches, your joints ache, your throat is sore, and your stomach. Well, let's just say you've been on close terms with the ditch behind your hut all week. You're probably sick. Again. It starts with a general sense of being off a fuzziness behind the eyes, a touch of heat in your forehead, and a small but deeply ominous boil forming on your back. You hope it's nothing. It's never nothing. Your neighbor is no help. They're coughing so hard they sound like they're trying to unbake their own lungs. Another villager limps past with a foot wrapped in old rags, muttering something about hot humors. You nod knowingly, though you have no idea what that means. You consider visiting the local healer, a woman who smells strongly of elderberry and judgment. She lives 2 fields away and tends to diagnose everything as either bad blood, bad spirits, or too much night air. Her cure-all boiled nettle mixed with garlic and crushed beetles. You tried it once, your stomach still hasn't forgiven you. In the post-Roman period, medicine is a patchwork of guesswork. Herbs left over Roman texts nobody can read in faith. The baths are gone. The public fountains are dry. You haven't seen soap in ever. You wash with cold stream water and hope the chill scares away the germs which you don't have a name for anyway. Historians still argue whether any Roman medical knowledge truly survived outside of elite monasteries. Some claim bits and pieces were preserved in rural oral traditions. Others believe most people just got sick and either recovered or didn't. You squat beside the hearth and inspect your arm. The rash has grown. It now resembles a small, angry map of the known world. You gently scratch it with a twig. The itch doesn't go away. The twig snaps. The rash wins. Meanwhile, lice have declared dominion over your scalp. You've named 2 of them. One is particularly bold and seems to wave at you in the reflection of your water jug. Bathing is out of the question, it's too cold, and the stream is currently occupied by a herd of sheep. Also, the healer says bathing opens the pores, which lets in the sickness. And honestly, you believe her. You attempt your own cure, a poultice made from mashed onions and a prayer. You wrap it in linen and tie it to your leg. That was supposed to be for your arm, but you forget midway and now you just feel confused and itchy. You smell like soup. Some villagers swear by charms. Your cousin wears a pouch of dried frog toes and fennel seeds tied around his neck. Says it keeps the bile aligned. Another man wears a hollowed walnut filled with ashes from a sacred fire. You don't ask questions anymore. You just nod and back away slowly. There's a monastery nearby, but they don't accept everyone. Only those with approved ailments and generous donations. You have neither. Last week they turned away a woman who had what looked suspiciously like a broken rib. They gave her a handful of ash and a firm blessing. She hasn't returned. Monks there copy old Roman medical scrolls, except they're in Latin, and the bits about surgery are usually skipped in favor of remedies involving prayers, relics, and fasting. They believe suffering purifies the soul. You're beginning to suspect your soul must be gleaming. Today, your entire village is buzzing with concern over a sick goat that sneezed 3 times before noon. The priest has declared a day of fasting. You were already fasting, but now you're spiritually fasting too. Someone suggests bleeding. That's always the fallback. They say letting out the bad blood rebalances the humors. You try to picture what your humors are doing, probably arguing in a ditch. You politely decline the offer to be sliced with a reused bronze blade, just in case. Your head throbs. You lie down on the hard-packed floor and stare at the ceiling, which is really just the underside of the roof. A small beetle wanders across a beam. You envy its clarity of purpose. You wonder what Romans would have done. Probably summoned a physician bathed in warm, perfumed water and applied a poultice of rose oil and crushed pearls. You apply some moss and cold spit. It's not quite the same. Quirky fact, in some regions, people still believe that sneezing expelled demons. If you sneeze more than once, you're either very blessed or very possessed. You sneeze 3 times. A child gasps and runs off to find a priest. You assure yourself it's just a cold, or maybe scurvy, or flux, or bad spirits. You don't know. You may never know. The healer is busy mixing something with fish bones and whispers. By nightfall, you're shivering under a wool blanket that smells like regret. The fire's low, your rash is back, and you swear the beetle has returned with a friend, but you're still here. Still breathing, still itchy, and in post-Roman Europe, that's pretty much a medical miracle. You survived the night, but barely. The fire gave up around midnight, and the blanket did its best impersonation of a wet dog. You slept in fits mostly out of spite and woke up with your left arm under someone else's goat. Don't ask. It's not worth the emotional energy. As you squint toward the half-light filtering through your fur-covered window, your first thought isn't about food or warmth. It's about whether your home will still be standing by the end of the day, or if someone somewhere will decide to burn it down just to make a point. Welcome to the power vacuum. Rome has fallen, and with it the illusion of order. There are no central administrators here, no governors, no legions, just men with swords, vague titles, and strong opinions about what's theirs, including occasionally you. You step outside and glance at the distant hills. Smoke curls upward not from hearth fires, but from a burned village. Again. You don't know whose it was, only that it wasn't yours. This time. Raiders are a feature, not a bug. Sometimes they're Saxons. Sometimes they're Franks. Occasionally, they're just bored local war bands who got tired of fighting each other and decided to try out your neighborhood. Borders change so frequently, they might as well be rumors. Historians still argue whether early medieval warlords were remnants of Roman military command or just charismatic thugs with good branding. From your muddy perch, the distinction is meaningless. All you know is that someone shows up demanding grain labor or allegiance, and you say yes. Or you say nothing because your mouth is full of bread made from tree bark. Yesterday, a rider came through wearing a wolf pelt and declaring himself Count of the Riverlands. No one's ever called this region the Riverlands, and the only river nearby is a glorified puddle. Still, he had a sword and 7 men, so he counts now. Literally. Law. You mean the law of whomever can hit hardest. Disputes are settled by strength intimidation or trial by ordeal, which usually involves fire water or a rusty blade and a strong stomach. Justice here smells like wet leather and anxiety. You recall when your neighbor's son stole a chicken. He was made to carry a hot iron for 12 paces. If his hand healed clean, he was innocent. If it didn't, well, no one really checked. He couldn't use that hand again, but he did get to keep the chicken. You keep your head down, your door shut, and your allegiance flexible. Yesterday you were a free peasant under the protection of Lord Elric. Today Elric is allegedly dead, thrown into a ravine by a man calling himself King of the Hollow Wood. You nod respectfully at both names. Your village has formed a loose alliance with nearby settlements. It's less a militia, and more a collection of tired men with farming tools, and one person who insists his shovel is blessed by St. Cuthbert. He swings it like a mace. The others let him believe it works. Wandering mercenaries sometimes stop by. They offer services in exchange for food, shelter, or a goat. One claimed to be a Roman veteran. He wore a dented helmet and quoted Latin while spitting into the fire. No one understood him, but he had good posture, so he got a room. One of the quirkiest figures in your village is a man who calls himself a law sayer. He walks around reciting old Roman laws from memory, except most are wildly inaccurate or completely made up. "Let no man milk another man's goat on Tuesdays," he announced once. No one's questioned it since. Your home was once a Roman granary. Now it's mostly holes and splinters, but it's yours kind of. There's no official deed. You found it. You swept it. That's 9/10 of ownership now. The nearest fortification is the old Roman watchtower. Locals took most of the stones to build pig shelters, but the base still stands. It serves as a meeting place gallows and general reminder of what authority used to look like before everyone forgot what uniforms were. Sometimes a local noble sends a rider with parchment and a seal declaring some new tax or military duty. The village elder squints at it, then stuffs it behind the fireplace. If the rider insists, the elder blames the fog, the mud, or God. If that fails, we offer him weak beer and hope he forgets. But not all is chaos. There's still structure even if it's improvised. People remember who saved whose donkey during last winter's flood, who lent tools, who stole them. That's your real justice system now grudges and favors. You pass a boy today practicing with a wooden sword. He says he wants to be a knight. You don't have the heart to tell him there's no such thing yet, not really. Just bruisers with titles. But you nod and offer him a carrot. He looks confused but grateful. A dog runs past with something suspiciously like a human foot in its mouth. You look away. Some questions are better left unanswered. Still, despite the raiders and the constant existential dread, life continues. You repair what breaks. You dig where you can. You plant your winter barley and pray it grows straighter than last season's attempt. You keep your ear to the ground literally. Sometimes the rumble of hooves is the only warning you get. And when strangers arrive, you offer a smile, a lie, and maybe a bowl of soup made mostly of regret and nettles. Because in the post-Roman world, power changes hands more often than spoons. You wake up scratching. Not because of a bug bite, no, that would imply a singular event. This is more of a coordinated campaign. Your entire body feels like a battlefield, and the invading army wears 100 tiny boots with tiny teeth, lice, fleas, possibly a mite or two. You've stopped keeping score. Your clothes, if we can generously call them that, are the first suspects. They haven't been washed in, you're not sure. Weeks, months. What even counts as laundry anymore? The local stream is frigid, and last time you tried soaking your tunic in it, it froze into a crinkled sculpture that smelled like goose droppings for a week. You peel the woolen mass off your shoulders. It sighs audibly. Or maybe that's you. Either way, it doesn't help. The garment is more holes than fabric. Rough stitching crisscrosses the shoulders where Aunt Hesta tried to patch it with leftover scraps from a feed sack. It held for about 3 days. Then the lice moved back in. Historians examining post-Roman textiles often find more evidence of insects than weaving. Threads are uneven, dyes are faint or absent, and buttons dream on. Your outfit is held together by leather thongs hope and at least 3 accidental knots you still haven't figured out. You scratch your back against the door frame like a half-conscious ox. The relief lasts for 3 glorious seconds. Then a flea bites your inner thigh and you nearly kick over the fire pit. Underwear, you ask, not really a thing. Maybe a linen shift if you're lucky and wealthy enough to own 2 layers. Most days, it's commando in itchy homespun wool, which creates a delightful friction with every step. Forget fashion. Here, comfort is a folktale. You remember the old Roman statues with their flowing togas, crisp tunics, draped elegance. Your version of that wool sack with a tear under the arm and a crust of dried barley porridge on the hem. You're not even ashamed anymore. It's called survival couture. Your boot's well boot has 1 flap and a bit of sole left. The other foot is wrapped in cloth burlap and prayer. You try not to think about winter. Last year, 3 toes turned black. You named them and then buried them ceremoniously in the garden. The carrots never grew quite right afterward. Quirky fact of the day, some early medieval folk used urine to clean clothes. Apparently, the ammonia helped bleach stains and kill off lice. You tried it once. The lice returned. The smell never left. Wool is the default fabric. It's thick, warm when dry, but oh so scratchy. Linen exists, but is precious, spun from flax woven painstakingly and often reserved for burial shrouds. So unless you plan to fake your death just to wear comfortable undergarments, you're stuck with the stuff that feels like a soft bramble bush. You shuffle toward the hearth and shake out your cloak. A beetle tumbles free. You nod at it as if apologizing. The cloak has holes, smells of smoke and mutton, and weighs roughly as much as a damp sheep. But it's yours. You drape it over your shoulders like royalty and pretend not to notice the tick burrowing into your armpit. Children here don't have clothes of their own. They wear smaller versions of adult garments handed down until they disintegrate. You once saw a 4-year-old dressed in what was clearly part of an old curtain fastened with a belt of braided grass. He looked more dignified than most adults. Even the church doesn't offer much relief. Monks wear robes, sure, but many of them are rough wool too. Only the high clergy get soft fabrics, and even then only during holidays. You once heard a rumor about a bishop who owned silk. He was later accused of sorcery and chased into a swamp. Historians still debate how fashion evolved during this era, whether people clung to Roman styles or forged new looks out of necessity. Evidence suggests both. But whatever was worn, comfort was rarely the goal. Clothing served as protection signal and storage. Yes, pockets were often just slits in the tunic lined with twine and hope. You pass your neighbor in the lane. She's wearing a patched-up shift and a hood made from rabbit skins. It's tied under her chin with twine and something that looks suspiciously like a fishbone. You compliment her. She grunts. That's peak post-Roman etiquette. You try not to think about laundry. The process is horrific. It involves hauling buckets of freezing water, soaking garments in lye made from wood ash, and pains scrubbing them on stones and then wringing them out with fingers already cracked from cold. Then comes drying, assuming it's not raining, misting, or generally being unpleasant, which it usually is. You once tried drying your tunic near the fire. It caught on a stray ember and you had to put it out with your foot. That's why one sleeve is shorter than the other. Asymmetry is all the rage now. Probably. Despite all this, people make do. A strip of leather becomes a belt. A broken comb gets passed around like treasure. Someone finds an old Roman brooch in the field and wears it proudly even though it pokes them with every step. Clothing isn't about expression, it's about identity. As in, I am still alive, I am still warm, I am still scratching, but I'm here. And that honestly is the best fashion statement you can hope for in this century. It's still dark out when you feel it, that sharp, cruel draft slicing through the wall like a ghost with frostbitten fingers. You pull your blanket tighter, but it's no use. Cold doesn't knock in post-Roman Europe. It seeps, it waits. Then it moves in and makes itself very comfortable. Your fire's burned down to ash. You prod it with a stick. Nothing. You prod it again because somehow you think that'll make a difference. It doesn't. Outside, the wind moans through what used to be a window, and something on the roof shifts, maybe a loose tile, maybe a small, angry god. You crawl from your mat and stumble toward your wood pile, which, surprise, is no longer a pile. It's 2 damp logs and a hopeful-looking stick. Someone's been taking from it again. You suspect your cousin. Or a deer. You're not ruling anything out. You light a sliver of kindling using flint and steel, which takes 17 tries and at least 1 accidental swear. The flame catches, then almost immediately gives up. You beg it quietly. It sputters, then flickers to life like a bored candle. You warm your hands and whisper apologies to whatever spirit of fire might be listening. Once this home was part of a Roman villa. Back then, they had Hippocaust's clever underground heating systems that warmed floors with hot air from a furnace. But the ducts are collapsed now, and the furnace has been turned into a goat pen. You tried sleeping down there once. The goat did not approve. Historians still debate how widely hippocausts were used in private homes, but you don't need debate. You need insulation. Instead, you have gaps in the walls and a chimney that works mostly as an invitation for the wind to visit and complain about your cooking. You wrap yourself in your cloak still damp from yesterday's snow and step outside. The sky is colorless, a flat gray smear of dawn. Frost crunches beneath your feet. Your toes go numb instantly. That's fine. Toes are optional now. The path through the village is half ice, half memory. Smoke curls lazily from a few nearby huts. Everyone's using what little firewood they have sparingly, hoping spring comes early. It won't. You pass a man chopping wood in his undertunic, shivering violently, but pretending not to notice. He nods at you through chattering teeth. You nod back as if you're both part of some exclusive misery club, which, honestly, you are. Some mornings you help tear apart old Roman ruins for building materials. Bricks, tiles, anything that holds heat longer than a breath. You once carried a chunk of mosaic wall 6 miles home. It cracked in half when you dropped it. Now it's a shelf for your clay bowls. Your own house has walls 2 feet thick, built from salvaged stone and mud. They retain cold beautifully, like a very patient glacier. You're considering stuffing the gaps with moss again, but last time you did, that mice moved in and threw a party. The sun finally rises weak and pale like a candle floating in dishwater. It doesn't warm anything. It just shows you all the places where the roof is leaking and the frost has crept inside. Quirky fact of the day: firewood theft was so common in certain regions that villages imposed fines, or more often, social shunning. You once watched 2 families argue over a half-burnt stump for an entire morning. One claimed ancestral rights. The other pointed to scorch marks. The stump ended up in the river. Some folks try insulating their homes with animal hides. You tried that once. The hide froze solid, then cracked. Now it's a doormat. Others dig pit houses, semi-underground homes where warmth lingers better. But that invites flooding mold and the occasional toad that refuses to leave. You trudge to the communal kiln. It's still glowing faintly, left over from yesterday's pottery batch. You stand near it like a moth and try not to look desperate. Someone hands you a small cup of heated barley water. It tastes like regret, but warms your hands, so you say thank you. Inside the kiln's little hut, a few people are sleeping upright. They've given up on personal hearths and now just rotate through this makeshift sauna. Someone snores. Someone else mutters prayers. You find a warm brick, press it to your chest, and try not to cry from joy. Historians sometimes speak poetically about communal warmth and shared hardship. From your perspective, it's mostly about getting enough butt space near the fire without accidentally leaning into someone's face. Eventually, you make your way back home. The house is no warmer, the fire is no braver, but you're carrying a handful of hot ash in a clay bowl. You set it in the center of the room like a sacred offering. It hisses softly. You pretend that's a comforting sound. By afternoon, the temperature inside your home rises 2 degrees. You feel like you've won something. But night is coming, and the wind doesn't care how good your day was. You've learned to live with the cold. You've learned to live with the hunger, the rats, the boils, the warlords. But now something new is gnawing at your bones, and it isn't the weather. It's fear. That special kind of fear that comes when you know deep down that nobody really understands what's going on anymore. Not the priest, not the elders, not even that slightly ominous woman who lives near the woods and claims to speak to owls. The old Roman world had structure, science, philosophy, even doctors with tools and books. That's gone now. What you've got instead are amulets, mutterings, and a whole lot of chicken bones. It starts with a whisper. Someone's baby fell ill yesterday and turned pale blue. The mother blames bad air. Her neighbor blames a cursed rock. The priest blames unconfessed sin. And you blame whatever it was that rustled in the trees last night and didn't stop until morning. Superstition is the new science. Magic has made a roaring comeback, and it's wearing a lovely necklace of wolf teeth. You reach for your own protection charm, a small sack of herbs, and a carved bead shaped like a cat. It smells like mildew. You've never been entirely sure what it does, but your cousin swears by it. He also swears at birds, so the jury's out. This morning, someone found a dead squirrel on the chapel steps. That would have been merely gross, but its eyes were missing. A sign, apparently, of what no one knows, but it was enough to make old Einar dig up his late wife's burial mound and move the stones just to be safe. Historians still argue whether pagan rituals truly persisted into the early Middle Ages, or whether what we see now is just Christian practice laced with leftover fears. But here in your village, people burn herbs for saints and whisper to trees. The line between holy and haunted has completely vanished. The priest performs mass in Latin. No one understands it. That might be for the best. He rings bells. He shakes incense. He also keeps a small bronze dagger under the altar in case of spiritual emergencies. You've seen him stab a loaf of bread with it. No one asked why. A woman down the lane swears her cow speaks in riddles when the moon is full. Someone else says the local stream is haunted by a boy who drowned while chasing a fox. Another insists their dog can see ghosts. You tried asking the dog. It sneezed and walked away. Your village elder keeps a horn on his door filled with crushed mint rabbit fur and hair from a black horse. It's supposed to ward off envy. You're not sure it works, but you've never envied his hair, so maybe it does. You've adopted the habits. Everyone has. You walk around whispering charms when you pass certain stones. You avoid stepping on cracks in the mill road. You leave an onion on your windowsill to keep nightmares away. It's not working, but your room smells impressively defensive. Quirky fact. In some parts of early medieval Europe, people wore little parchment scrolls sewn into their clothes, bits of scripture or apocryphal psalms meant to protect against demons. You once saw a man who had stitched his scroll directly into his tunic. He got caught in a fence and was stuck for 2 days. Divine protection, questionable mobility. Sometimes travelers come through with stories. In the north, people worship a tree that bleeds. In the south, a woman cured her entire town's illness by throwing 7 frogs into a fire at sunrise. The details are vague. The frogs are never available when you need them. Scholars later theorized that this period was rich with folk Christianity, where new religious beliefs were absorbed through local customs rather than direct instruction. In your case, that means you cross yourself and knock on wood at the same time. You're covering all your bases. You find a feather on your doorstep, black curved and very obviously placed. You stare at it for a while, then toss it into the fire. It shrieks. Not literally, but it feels like it might have. You spend the rest of the day whispering just in case into your porridge. Children carry little dolls made from corn husks. Some are dressed as saints. Some have fangs. No one corrects them. Everyone agrees the dolls are very powerful and should not be left outside during storms. You once asked the priest why people believe in such things. He said, because the Lord moves in mysterious ways, and sometimes those ways involve screaming pigs. You haven't asked again. At night you hear something scratching beneath the floorboards. Could be a rat. Could be something older, something watching. You clutch your cat-shaped amulet and whisper your grandmother's old chant under your breath. You don't believe in it. Not really, but you still whisper. The scratching beneath the floorboards is gone by morning, but something else has arrived, an eerie stillness in the air, the kind that settles just before a thunderstorm or the arrival of tax collectors. You step outside and immediately regret it. The road is lined with strangers. Well, not strangers exactly, just people you haven't met yet, all armed, all vaguely damp, and all claiming to be part of the Count's household. You've never heard of the Count. Neither has your village elder. But these men are holding spears, so you decide to nod politely and welcome them to your deeply underwhelming home. One of them gestures toward your firewood pile, which, as we've established, is mostly metaphorical, and says it now belongs to the Count. Another asks for food. A third tries to flirt with your goat. You try not to take that personally. These are not soldiers, not in the Roman sense. No crisp uniforms, no polished discipline. Just men with mismatched armor, nicked swords, and enough self-importance to fill a monastery's wine cellar. They claim to be enforcers of order, though most of that order seems to involve taking what little you have and threatening to come back for more. This is feudalism in its awkward teenage phase, not yet organized, certainly not fair, but determined to assert itself anyway. Historians still debate when exactly feudal structures took hold after Rome's collapse, but here, you're living the prequel. Authority is personal, not institutional. And it usually smells like wet leather and horse sweat. One man tells you he now owns the stream behind your hut. You ask if that includes the frogs. He doesn't laugh. You offer him a very small onion as tribute. He accepts it, solemnly pockets it, and moves on. You don't know if that was a tax or a bribe. It might have been a trade. Everything is blurry now. The lord or count or reclaimer of imperial glory, depending on his mood, rides into view. He's wearing a helmet with antlers and a patchy wool cape. His horse looks embarrassed. He speaks with flowery words, quoting scripture and something that might have once been Virgil. Then he demands every able-bodied man assist in building his new watchtower. This is a problem. Most of the village is either elderly ill or deeply committed to pretending they're both. You quietly shuffle into the background, adopting a limp for added effect. Labor isn't paid. It's expected. In exchange, the Count promises protection. From what you ask. He smiles. From people who don't respect my authority. You nod. You've seen this movie before. The work begins immediately. Stones from old Roman roads are dragged back into a pile. A few villagers joke that the ghosts of the engineers must be weeping. You pretend to laugh, mostly to hide the sound of your joints cracking under the weight of a half-buried column segment. The site is muddy, uneven, and haunted by a chicken that refuses to move. You build around it. There are no blueprints. Just barked orders from a man holding a stick and a handful of ambition. Someone stacks bricks the wrong way. Someone else drops a beam on their foot. A third tries to hide in the shrubbery and is caught when he sneezes on a hedgehog. Quirky fact. Some early medieval fortifications were less about actual defense and more about psychological presence. A tower meant control. Even if it leaned slightly and had a tendency to collapse during storms, it signaled someone is in charge here. Usually someone with very loud boots. You finish your assigned tasks with minimal injury and maximum splinters. The Count thanks everyone by hosting a feast, which is really just a boiled turnip in a large shared bowl and a lengthy speech about destiny. Someone claps. You don't know why. Later that evening, a few of the household guards linger in your village. One tries to trade his rusty dagger for your cousin's piebald chicken. Negotiations escalate into shouting, then into interpretive dancing, and finally into both men falling into a ditch. You quietly retrieve the chicken and offer her some nettles. The next day, the Count is gone. His men, too. All that remains is a leaning pile of stones, 3 broken shovels, and an oddly placed coat of arms made of tin and optimism. No one speaks about it. But everyone now refers to that corner of the field as the Count's Folly. Even the goats avoid it. You sit beside the fire, still sore from hauling masonry, and reflect on what just happened. Was it politics, military service, civic duty? No one's sure anymore, but it was definitely Tuesday. In the absence of central government legitimacy is just performance art with swords. Titles are claimed, not granted. Authority is loud, not legal, and the only real law is how quickly you can pretend to be someone else's vassal before they make you regret it. But you're warm now. You've still got your goat, and the onion's safe and sound. So in your own strange way, maybe you won. By now you've accepted that normal in the post-Roman world is a flexible concept. Some days, normal is your neighbor convincing himself his cat is the reincarnation of a Visigoth warrior. Other days, normal is watching a pig get blessed in the village square because it sneezed, and someone took that as a divine omen. Today, normal is work. Endless grunting, back-breaking, creatively unpleasant work. Not the noble kind of labor that poets write about, just the sort that leaves you smelling like fermented hay and wondering if your hands will ever stop being permanently shaped like a claw. You start with the fields, not because it's the most urgent task, but because everything else is worse. Your hoe is bent, your soil is moody, and your back has been protesting since approximately the year 478. But the barley won't plant itself, and you need anything to eat that isn't boiled nettle stew for the 7th day in a row. You crouch, dig, plant, repeat. Occasionally, a crow lands nearby and watches you with smug contempt. You glare back. It doesn't blink. You swear one of them has been following you since spring. Quirky fact. Some early medieval peasants believed talking to your crops made them grow better. So now you mumble pleasantries to your barley seeds just in case. You're doing great, you whisper. Please don't die. Around midday, you switch to mending the fence. The pigs have figured out that pushing the same wobbly post long enough results in glorious freedom. Yesterday, they ate half your onion patch and chased a monk up a hill. You admire their initiative. You do not admire their timing. The fence is made of whatever was available. Branches rope the broken axle from an old cart and a former door. You reinforce it with rocks. One of them looks like a screaming face, but you wedge it in anyway. Nothing screams, "Stay inside," like a rock that already is. You've also got domestic chores, hauling water from the stream, chopping wood with an axe so dull it might as well be a spoon, scrubbing cooking pots with sand and curses. There's always something to do, and none of it glamorous. Historians still argue whether rural labor in the early medieval period was truly worse than under the Roman system. Some say peasants had more autonomy. Others point out that autonomy doesn't mean much when your only tool is your cousin's chipped shovel and the land hates you personally. At some point, a neighbor arrives and asks if you'll help repair the village palisade. Apparently, one of the posts was eaten by a goat, and now the outer wall looks more like a series of regretful sticks. You agree, mostly because saying no means being publicly guilted during the evening prayers. You drag wood uphill, you dig a hole, you lose a sandal in the mud and make a mental note to pretend it was stolen by bandits. The palisade, when repaired, still leans dramatically to the left. It now looks like it's shrugging. Symbolic, really. Later, you join a few others to clean out the village's grain pit. The last harvest left some mold, possibly a family of stoats. You draw the short straw and climb inside with a torch and a broom. Something hisses. You pretend you didn't hear it. You sweep fast, quirky detail. Many communities buried their grain in sealed underground pits lined with straw. The idea was simple, cooler temperatures, less rot, more rats. You're not sure it works. You are sure that you will dream about the glowing eyes you saw at the back of that pit. Eventually, you return home utterly filthy. You attempt to wash up using a bowl of lukewarm water and a rag that might have once been a curtain. It mostly just rearranges the dirt on your face, but you call it a win. Your hands throb. Your feet are swollen. Your shoulders creak like the church bell rope during a thunderstorm. But you're done for now, and nothing is visibly on fire. You count that as a productive day. As dusk settles, you join the others near the central fire. A child sings a song that has no known tune. An elder tells a story that ends 3 times before actually ending. Someone passes around a bowl of something warm and vaguely edible. You accept it gratefully. There is laughter creaking stools, the clink of a spoon against a cracked bowl. Life in the post-Roman world may be brutal, uncertain, and profoundly itchy. But there are still these moments. Shared bread, shared stories, shared sighs at a fence that probably won't last the week. You lean back, look up at the darkening sky, and let the ache settle into your bones like an old friend. Tomorrow you'll do it all again, because the barley won't plant itself, and the pigs never stop plotting. The rooster doesn't crow, it screams. You're fairly certain it does it on purpose now, timing its screech just as you drift into something resembling real sleep. You consider throwing a stick at it, but it belongs to the priest, and you're pretty sure that counts as a sin. You sit up slowly, stretching joints that respond with a chorus of pops and wheezes. The air is heavy with mist and cow breath. Another glorious morning in the post-Roman countryside, where the only thing more consistent than misery is manure. Today is market day, or more precisely, it's loosely organized barter chaos held in a muddy field day. You don't have much to trade, but you've bundled a small pouch of dried mushrooms, a clay pot with a crack so fine it almost doesn't leak, and a half-knit pair of socks. You're hoping someone out there is hungry, forgetful, and cold-footed. You walk the rutted road toward the market clearing. The path is lined with bent fences, crooked stones, and hopeful beggars. Some sell turnips. Others sell miracle remedies made from boiled moss and aggressive hope. One man is offering authentic Roman nails. You squint. They look suspiciously like bent fish bones. The clearing bustles with humans, pigs, chickens, carts, dogs, and smells that defy categorization. You step in something and choose not to investigate. Your boots were already ruined, and your standards left town around the same time the last bishop did. You find a place to sit, stand awkwardly next to a barrel labeled wine. The quotation marks are doing some very heavy lifting. The man behind it insists it's aged and imported. It's cloudy and tastes like regret. You trade him your cracked pot for a half cup and instantly forget your own name. Market day is more than trade. It's information. News from other villages arrives by cart, by traveler, or by someone shouting loudly from a hay bale. You hear that a king died 2 valleys over, or was crowned, or possibly both. The details are fuzzy. So is the messenger's beard. You learn that the price of grain is rising, the river to the west is flooding, and a goat in a neighboring hamlet gave birth to twins with one head. You nod solemnly. You've learned not to question these things, especially when told by women with 100 wooden beads braided into their hair. Historians still argue whether early medieval markets were hubs of meaningful commerce or just glorified gossip pits with cabbages. Honestly, it's both. Trade happens, yes, but so does matchmaking, rumor swapping, and a surprisingly passionate debate over whether bees are blessed or cursed. You wander past stalls with furs, herbs, bent tools, and oddly specific religious relics. One man claims his ring belonged to a Roman general. You ask which one. He says Julius. You walk away. You stop at a stall run by a woman who makes dolls out of hay and animal teeth. She offers you one with a single eye and a smile stitched in red thread. You ask what it does. She shrugs. Keeps things away. You buy it without further questions. There's a musical performance, sort of. A man with a cracked lute plucks at the strings while a child shakes a jar of beans rhythmically. Together they create something that might be music or might be a curse. People clap. Someone throws a turnip. Quirky detail of the day, some medieval markets had public shaming corners. Today, a man stands on a stool wearing a chicken mask for overcharging on eggs last week. No one speaks to him. Someone does feed him a piece of bread out of pity. You make a mental note never to cross the egg widow. You manage to trade your mushrooms for a small chunk of beeswax and a handful of questionable raisins. Victory. By afternoon, the energy sags. People begin packing up. Chickens are chased. Goats are gathered. One cart breaks a wheel and causes a traffic jam consisting of 3 pigs and a monk. You linger a while longer, sitting near the edge of the field. A group of old women plays some kind of dice game using sheep knuckles and muttered curses. You don't understand the rules, but they seem happy. That's rare enough to admire. Eventually, you begin your walk home. The sack is lighter, but your spirits are slightly less so. You've got wax for candles, a haunted doll, and vague news about someone getting eaten by a river spirit. That's a solid haul. Back in the village, the air is cooler. You light your hearth with a few scraps of dry straw and coax the flames to life. Outside, the wind picks up. A dog barks. Somewhere a crow watches you with what can only be described as judgment. You sit by the fire and unwrap the raisins. One moves. You eat around it. It's not much, but it's market day. And for a moment the world felt slightly larger, slightly warmer, and only mildly cursed. You're startled awake by the sound of chanting, not the peaceful hymn-like kind, but the sort of low rhythmic muttering that sounds like someone's trying to bribe a ghost. You lie still, staring at the roof beams, and wonder briefly whether you're still dreaming. Then the smell hits you, damp, earth-burning herbs and something sharp metallic like boiled nails. You step outside and follow the sound, half curious, half terrified. A small group has gathered in the clearing beyond the old Roman well, each person holding something, a bone, a candle stub, a turnip carved like a face. One woman is waving what appears to be a dead weasel over a bowl of steaming water. You recognize this. It's a protection rite. Someone in the village saw a bad omen again. You ask quietly what triggered it. The answer is simple. The moon looked wrong. That's all it takes these days. A crooked cloud. A sneeze in the wrong direction. A dream about geese. Historians still argue whether these rites were remnants of pre-Christian practices or simply folk traditions shaped by hardship and fear. Here they're just normal, like rain, or spoiled milk, or the sense that something is always quietly watching. You watch the weasels swing once more, then drift away before someone hands you a bundle of twigs and asks you to chant. You're still chewing your breakfast cold barley mash and one remaining raisin from market day. You need a minute. As you return home, you notice more charms hung from doorways, feathers, knotted ropes, dried apples pierced with pins. One neighbor has painted a large eye on his fence. Another has started sleeping outside to confuse the spirits. You don't ask. The village is tense today. Not for any single reason, just that general bone-deep unease that drifts in sometimes like mist or taxes. You decide to stay useful. You check the grain pit, still smells like a badger patch, a leaking section of your roof with moss and aggressive optimism, and sweep the hearth. But no one's really working. People gather in threes and fours, speaking in low tones. The elder has taken to walking the lane with a bell ringing it once every hour. He says it keeps the balance. You nod. He's probably right. Quirky fact of the day, some early medieval folks believed that ringing iron or bronze bells disrupted evil spirits. You don't know if it works, but it's loud, and sometimes volume is mistaken for effectiveness. Just like politics. By noon, the priest holds a service. Attendance is mandatory today, not by decree, just by collective superstition. He blesses the fields, the river, and the village pigs. One of the pigs sneezes. Everyone gasps. The priest doubles down with extra incense. You sit in the back, clutching your amulet, your soup bowl, and a profound sense that you've missed a few pages in the script of life. When the priest pulls out a sprig of rosemary and starts sprinkling it into the fire, you close your eyes and pretend it's just aromatherapy. After the service, people begin preparing offerings, small things left on stone altars, window ledges, or near old trees. A crust of bread, a shiny pebble, a child's wooden toy. You leave a button. It's the last one from your good tunic. You hope the spirits appreciate vintage. There's a woman named Magda who claims to be able to read smoke. Today, she sees a serpent a circle and a man with 3 arms. You don't press for clarification. She charges a turnip per vision, and you're saving yours for dinner. You help your neighbor hang a protective wreath over his door. It's made from garlic nettles and what might be a bit of last year's curtain. He says it repels the long shadows. You don't ask what those are. You just nod, hammer in the nail, and admire the craftsmanship. As evening falls, the wind picks up, and the trees start that slow, whispery swaying. Fires are lit earlier than usual. Doors are barred. Windows, such as they are shuttered with bits of wood and folded cloth. You do the same, pressing your back to the door and breathing deep. The night feels thick. Even the dog refuses to go outside. It curls up by your fire and stares at the door like it knows something you don't. You offer it a scrap of bread. It doesn't move. You eat the bread yourself. Later you hear a knock. Just one. No one goes to answer. Everyone in the village hears it, and no one speaks of it the next day. That's how these things work. You lie in bed, eyes wide, heart slow. You think about the weasel, the bell, the pig, the button, the single knock, and eventually, without knowing quite when, you fall asleep. You wake up to silence, not the peaceful bird-song-laced kind. The eerie, unnatural silence, the kind that makes you think something has gone terribly wrong, or perhaps terribly right in a way you can't yet understand. No carts creaking, no pigs squealing, not even the rooster screaming its usual obscenities. Just wind brushing against the door, soft and deliberate like fingers testing the latch. You dress quickly, if one can call pulling on the same itchy layers from yesterday dressing. Your socks are still damp. Your tunic smells like smoked fish and desperation. But it's enough. You step outside, squinting at the mist that now blankets the village like a poorly spun shroud. The first thing you notice is the absence of smoke. No hearths burning, no cooking fires, no distant clatter of pots. Just the fog so thick it eats your footsteps. Someone has left a clay bowl on your doorstep. Inside a cracked egg, 2 sprigs of rosemary, and a coin with a hole through the middle. You don't touch it. You just nod, pick it up carefully, and place it under the bench inside your doorway. You don't ask questions about gifts like that. You simply make space. You finally hear movement near the well, voices soft and clustered. You approach slowly and find a gathering. Not mourning, not celebrating, just waiting. A messenger arrived during the night, they say. From a larger settlement to the west, news has traveled. A new king has declared himself. Again. This makes 3 new kings in the last 6 months, not counting the 2 that immediately vanished after coronation and/or mysterious chicken-related mishaps. Historians still debate how centralized power truly was in these early kingdoms, whether these declarations mattered, or if they were mostly for the benefit of the king's neighbors and his grandmother. But here to your village it means change, probably taxes, definitely oaths, maybe war. The messenger, a weary man in a patchwork cloak, hands a scroll to the village elder. The elder reads aloud. The new king seeks loyal subjects, peace through unity, and offers pardons for all past disloyalties. This last part is met with a long communal silence. Then the elder coughs, folds the scroll, and says, "We'll think about it." You return home with more questions than answers. The idea of king seems far away, somewhere past the forests beyond the hills in stone halls where people eat daily and use napkins. But power, however abstract, has a way of reaching even here through scrolls and spears and messengers who never smile. By midday, the village splits into hushed discussions. Should they send a response, a gift, a representative? You suggest sending Gurn, the man who once fell into a cow and apologized to the wrong end. He is widely considered expendable and unusually lucky. You're given a new task, helping to repaint the old shield near the village entrance. The faded boar insignia is to be updated possibly with the new king's colors, or maybe just something more intimidating than mud on wood. You spend the next hour mixing soot-crushed berries and pig fat. The result is a deep maroon that smells faintly of regret. You paint carefully. A new crest begins to take shape, a 3-pronged symbol meant to represent strength, unity, and possibly a fork. You're not told which. You suspect someone just like the symmetry. Quirky fact, some early medieval communities used house banners or village emblems not just for identity, but also to confuse enemies. One village used an image of a chicken on fire. No one attacked them, not once. Possibly out of fear, possibly out of pity. Later, there's a gathering in the longhouse. Bread is shared. Wine, real wine, traded from someone who swears it came through Frankish hands, is poured into chipped cups. You sip slowly. It burns your throat and might also be vinegar, but it's the thought that counts. People discuss the king, the scroll, the messenger's worn boots. They recall older kings, older promises, older betrayals. One woman mutters that all kings are just taller bandits. No one disagrees. The elder finally speaks. We stay quiet. We give no oaths. Let them come find us. There are nods, but also worry. You've all seen what happens when kings come looking for loyalty. Still, for tonight the fire is warm. The bread is soft enough to chew without injury. Someone tells a story about a singing horse. You don't believe it, but you don't argue. Outside, the fog has lifted. Stars peek through a clearing sky. You step outside, stretch your arms, and feel for just a moment something close to peace. You still have your home, your name, your suspicious egg coin rosemary gift, and that strange painted fork crest. And sometimes in a world still reshaping itself, after the empire crumbled, that's more than enough. This morning the pigs have escaped again. You sigh not because it's a surprise, but because it's Tuesday, and this is now apparently how Tuesdays work. You grab a length of rope, a stale crust of bread, and the kind of dead-eyed resolve one usually reserves for tax audits or extended family reunions. The pigs are, of course, in the churchyard. One is rooting cheerfully near the priest's sandals. Another has discovered the taste of candle wax. The third has climbed halfway into the font. You herd them gently, using bribes, curses, and a stick with a bell tied to it. Two come willingly. The third pretends not to hear you, which is impressive, considering it's chewing on your tunic. After you've corralled them back into their pen, which now includes extra reinforcement from a broken door, 4 buckets, and a sleeping goose, you head to the stream to rinse off. The water is cold, clear, and utterly unconcerned with your struggles. You splash your face, breathe deep, and brace yourself for the day's real problem repairs. The millstone cracked again. It's been threatening to for weeks, and now it's official. You gather with 2 others by the mill and stare at the damage like it's going to apologize. It doesn't. You run your hand over the stone's edge, feeling the long split like a scar. Historians still debate how widespread watermills remained after Rome's collapse. Some argue that rural communities retained simple versions. Others believe most were lost and reinvented centuries later. Yours is somewhere in between. It sort of works. It mostly leaks. And it occasionally eats socks. You and the others begin pulling planks from a nearby shed. Not to rebuild the mill, but to repurpose them because that's the post-Roman way. Adapt or starve. The planks are damp, worm-eaten, and mildly cursed, judging by the number of splinters you acquire. But you get to work anyway. The repairs involve rope mud, clever swearing, and 3 unfortunate missteps into the water. You finish by midday tired but weirdly proud. It won't last the winter. It may not last the week. But it stands. And that's something. You sit near the edge of the field with a few others. One offers you a handful of boiled peas. Another offers gossip. You take both. Apparently, a nearby village has been raided, though no one knows by whom. Bandits, exiles. A very organized flock of geese. All are equally likely. The elder's response is classic. They weren't us, so let's not panic yet. You take turns sharpening tools on a whetstone that's been worn into an oval by 3 generations of anxiety. Your axe sings against it briefly before resuming its usual dull moan. You sigh. It's functional. Barely. Like most things around here. Quirky fact, some early medieval peasants believed tools held spirits. If a tool broke mid-task, it was considered offended. You murmur a quick apology to your axe just to be safe. The other peasants pretend not to notice. Then they murmur their own apologies to their hoes. Later, someone proposes a short hunt before dusk. You join in, not because you're hungry you are, but because it's the kind of communal activity that helps people forget they're slowly being crushed by political uncertainty and goat-related inflation. The hunt yields 1 squirrel, 3 birds, and an extremely irate badger who wins the encounter handily. You return with your dignity intact if slightly scratched. The squirrel is declared a feast. It's roasted over the fire, seasoned with wild herbs and consumed ceremoniously. You get a leg. Maybe. Back at home, you patch the hole in your roof with moss and leftover cloth. You check the traps near the grain pit empty. You light your little oil lamp with a prayer that it doesn't explode. And then, as always, you sit by the fire and wait for sleep to arrive. Outside, the wind picks up again. It always does at night. It presses against the door, peers through the cracks, and rattles your shutter with the persistence of someone looking for a spare blanket. You clutch your newly blunted axe, now patched with twine. It's ugly. It's tired. It's yours. The pigs are snoring. The fire is low. Your hands are sore. And somewhere in the woods, something howls, whether wolf or wind or the ghost of civilization past, you'll never know. But you do what people have done for centuries, close your eyes and trust that morning will come. Morning breaks gently today, less of a rooster's war cry, more of a soft nudge from the rising mist. For once nothing is on fire, screaming, or inexplicably missing. You sit up, slowly stretching like someone who forgot their spine was part of the warranty, and notice a curious stillness in your bones. Not peace exactly, just the absence of immediate dread. The air smells like wet soil and wood smoke. You step outside and blink at the low sun carving golden paths through the haze. For a fleeting moment, your village almost looks beautiful. You commit the moment to memory, knowing it probably won't survive lunch. Today is a feast day, though no one quite remembers which saint it's for. Someone thinks it might be for Saint Ermentrude, the one with the goats and the inexplicable fondness for salt. Others say it's just the day after the moon looked especially fat. Either way, there will be bread, possibly with flavor. Preparations begin early. The baker, a woman who has never smiled and probably never will, is already shouting about flour theft. You quietly return the handful you borrowed last week and offer a nettle in apology. She accepts it with a glare and a grunt. You consider that a win. The square fills slowly. Benches are dragged into crooked circles. Someone strings up cloth banners between the trees, leftovers from 5 other festivals and at least 1 funeral. A child is tasked with drawing saintly symbols in the dirt. They produce an elaborate duck. You all agree to accept it. You're assigned to the spit-turning crew responsible for rotating the dubious meat over a low fire. No one is entirely sure what the meat is. Possibly goat. Possibly something with hooves and opinions. You don't ask. You just turn. Historians still debate whether local feast days in the early medieval period followed strict liturgical calendars or were more spontaneous affairs based on harvest luck mood and availability of barley. Your village opts for spontaneity with an asterisk for weather and pig behavior. As the fire crackles and the smell of roasting meat fills the air, people relax. The children laugh. The dogs circle like tiny furry knights awaiting their moment. You share a mug of thin ale with your neighbor who hasn't spoken to you since that incident with the goose. He nods once. You consider it forgiveness. Quirky fact, some villages celebrated feast days by baking symbolic breads shaped like animals' saints or celestial bodies. Today's attempts look like squashed frogs and one angry loaf that might actually be a message. As the meal begins, people share whatever they have. Turnips, cabbage leaves, smoked fish, a suspicious-looking custard. You contribute a perfectly round rock you accidentally mistook for a potato. It's passed around reverently, then used to anchor the tablecloth. After the eating, there is storytelling. An elder spins a tale about a knight who defeated a dragon using only a spoon and righteous indignation. A child follows with a tale of a cow that learned to speak but only said no. Everyone applauds. Someone plays a pipe that sounds like a duck in distress. Everyone applauds again. You find yourself smiling. Not because life has become easier. It hasn't. Your boots still leak. Your house still lists slightly to one side. And your pig still resents you personally. But there's comfort in shared absurdity, in turning a meal into a memory. As the sun sets, the singing begins. Off-key, off-rhythm, off everything but sincere. You join in because sincerity is rare and music, even when bad, makes you feel like part of something ancient. The fire burns lower. The mugs grow lighter. One man dances with a cabbage, another falls asleep on a goat. You content and moderately tipsy watch sparks drift upward and wonder if stars are just old flames that never fell back down. Later walking home, you feel full not just in the stomach but in the soul. For all the chaos and uncertainty, there's still joy here. There's still humanity. Still laughter, still music, still cabbage-themed interpretive dance. You close your door behind you, remove your boots, and stretch out on your mat. The fire crackles. The world turns. You've made it through another day in a time that isn't built to be survived. And yet, here you are. By now, you don't wake up so much as re-emerge, like bread rising a second time, slow and cracked around the edges. The village is hushed, recovering from the feast. Even the pigs are quiet, sprawled in their pen like furry, contented boulders. Your head hums faintly, not from drink, but from the sheer act of being around so many people at once. You step outside and stretch into the gray morning. The air is damp again, heavy with the scent of wood smoke dew and something faintly sweet. Someone is boiling berries, probably for dye, possibly for jam, potentially for both. You breathe it in slow and deep. The ground squelches under your feet. A drizzle drifts in sideways, the kind that doesn't fall so much as loiter. You pull your cloak tighter and trudge toward the fields. Not because you have to, but because this is how days begin now, a check on the barley, a glance at the traps, and maybe a word or two with whatever crow decides to judge you today. The barley is still there, brave little stalks pressing upward through soil and stubbornness. One of them has bent toward the path, and you give it a gentle pat, like a friend who's trying their best. You whisper something nice to it. The crow rolls its eyes. You wander slowly, deliberately, letting the walk stretch. Each corner of your village holds a memory, now some soft, some splintered. There's the corner where the cartwheel broke the spot where the weasel rite took place, the stump where you first learned that sitting too fast on damp wood invites regrets, all part of the strange mosaic that is post-Roman life. Historians still argue whether early medieval villagers had a sense of community the way we understand it now. But when you look at the crooked houses, the shared tools, the patchwork, repairs, the feast fires, and even the shared curses, you know the answer. This place, ragged and muddled as it is home. Your neighbor waves. You wave back. She's already knee-deep in some kind of bramble project involving baskets and profanity. You don't ask. By mid-morning, the drizzle fades. Smoke drifts up from hearths again. The baker is already shouting. A child is being scolded for painting a duck on the church wall. A pig is in a tree, somehow. You help an elder carry wood across the lane. You tie up a sagging fence post. You check on the old man who swears his cat is a Roman spy. The cat glares at you. You nod in respect. Then at last you return home. You sit by your fire, stoke it gently, and take in the silence that isn't silence at all, the creak of beams, the crackle of twigs, the distant bleat of something undecided about its own existence. You cradle a warm mug of something vaguely herbal and think about everything you've endured. No armies, no plagues, no kings came this week. That alone feels like a miracle. And yet, even if they had, even if the roof leaked or the pigs rebelled or the soup grew legs, still you'd carry on. Because survival here isn't about triumph. It's about rhythm, about patience, about enduring with just enough stubborn joy to try again tomorrow. You think of the stories you've heard of Rome's baths and roads and grand marble halls. They seem like dreams now, slippery, too polished to be real. You live in the rough draft of a world rebuilding itself from memory and mud. But in this life, this quiet, soot-smudged, cabbage-scented life, you've learned something Rome never taught: how to sit still, how to listen to the wind, how to share a meal without asking for more. The rain picks up again, softer now, barely brushing the roof. You lie back on your mat. The fire flickers low. The world shrinks to 4 warm walls and the fading ache in your shoulders. You've made it through one more day. No empire needed. Just you, your tools, your stories. And the barley's still growing.